7.
Hi. Hi, everyone. How are you guys doing today? My
Hey,
name
everybody.
is Anshika. I'm an ocean educator here at Birch Aquarium. And down here, I have my friend Alan. Hey, Alan.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
Alan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name's Alan. I am an ocean educator here at Birch Aquarium, and I am from the San Diego area. I graduated just last year with a degree in zoology from Oregon State University, and now I work at the Birch Aquarium.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'm also an ocean educator at Birch. Alan and I are both interpreters. So basically what we do is we interpret science to the public. You've probably seen a couple other interpreters on the streams throughout the past few weeks. But yeah, so today we're going to have a great conversation all about sharks. Alan, do you like sharks?
I love sharks. Sharks are some of my favorite animals. I love getting to see them at the aquarium. I love getting to teach people all about them, and I also love swimming with them when I get the chance to.
Awesome. Alan, do you want to tell me a little bit about how you got involved with Birch Aquarium?
Yeah, so me and the Birch Aquarium actually go way, way far back. When I was a little kid, like 5, 6 years old, I used to go to sleepovers at the Birch Aquarium, and my parents used to take me there all the time. So I've been coming there ever since I was a little kid. Being from San Diego, it was one of my favorite spots to go, on the weekends and during the summer. And then when I was in high school, I actually interned with the youth summer internship at the Birch Aquarium. I got to do a lot of teaching with guests, teach them all about different sharks, different topics at the aquarium. And then when I was in college, I was studying zoology, and I knew I wanted to get involved with education. So I also went back to the aquarium and did a college internship. I actually did the same internship twice. And after graduating, I got a job working at the Birch Aquarium. So it's been a long, long past with me in the aquarium, but I'm really excited to be working there. It's one of my favorite institutions in San Diego. So I really love it there. And it's been awesome growing from a guest to finally an employee.
Awesome. All right. So are you ready to dive in and talk about sharks with me today?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Let's dive right in.
Awesome. All right. So this here's a leopard shark. Alan, can you tell me why leopard sharks are so cool and so important?
Yeah, so one of my favorite things about leopard sharks, when you first think about them, is the name. The name Leopard Shark. I think that's a really cool name. And they actually get that name from the patterns of dots and bars along their backs. So it kind of gives them the resemblance of a leopard. And I just think it's really cool when other animals get named after other animals. Leopard sharks are also really cool because they're like a local species that you can find in San Diego. And I think that's awesome when we get to teach people about animals that are, so local and so close to us, and something that they can actually see and experience.
Yeah, definitely. I've seen leopard sharks a lot right around La Jolla. We'll talk about our local leopard shark population in a little bit, but it's super cool to see these animals kind of just all the time, just right around us.
Yeah, definitely.
So, are leopard sharks big or small?
Yeah, so there's a lot of interesting things about leopard sharks, and you mentioned size. So size of a leopard shark is usually adults will get to about 6 feet tall. That's usually the largest a leopard shark will get. And leopard sharks, usually the females get a little bigger than the males, but like I said, they're typically around 6 feet or so. As you can see, there's some leopard sharks swim. Oh, there's one that goes right past there. You can see them swimming around. And leopard sharks, they're pretty cool. They're found only on the Pacific coast of the United States and Mexico. And they usually like warm, shallow water. So you're not going to really find them out in the deep ocean like a great white. You're more likely to see them, swimming along the sandy shores nearby the coast.
Awesome. Yeah. And anyone, feel free to, if you have any questions about sharks or leopard sharks in general, feel free to drop them in the comments and we can address them as we go.
Yep, definitely. We love to hear from you guys.
Yeah. So, I think leopard sharks are super cool, and it's really cool that they're a local species. In fact, do you know anything special that happens every summer in La Jolla with leopard sharks, Alan?
Yeah, so actually a very cool phenomenon that happens just down the coast from the aquarium, just off the coast of La Jolla shores, is this congregation of leopard sharks every summer. So you can see right here, this is some aerial footage taken from a Scripps researcher. And these are all leopard sharks swimming in the sandy shores of La Jolla. Now, this typically happens the end of every summer, usually when the water is most warm. And for everyone in the chat who's maybe wondering, why are these leopard sharks gathering here? We're going to fill you in through all about that and get towards the answer towards the end. But if you have any guesses, we'd love to hear from you guys in the chat why you think so many leopard sharks gather here during the summer. But yeah, so every summer there's a congregation of hundreds of leopard sharks just off La Jolla shores. You can see them swimming in even waist deep water just from the shore.
Yeah. And Alan, have you ever gotten the chance to swim with these leopard sharks in La Jolla?
Why, I'm glad you asked. I have actually. So I've gone swimming with these leopard sharks during my internships and also just for fun. So I've gone to take campers and guests at the aquarium swimming there. And it's really cool. If you go to La Jolla Shores, there's a restaurant actually called the Marine Room. And if you go directly out of the Marine Room at the right time towards the end of summer, like I said, you can see these leopard sharks from the shore swimming around. If you wade into the water waist deep, you'll see some swimming around you. And if you want to see some more and do some snorkeling, you can actually swim out there. And if you're nice and calm and you just float along the top, you're bound to see some leopard sharks swimming underneath you. And they're totally harmless. They're really cool sharks, and I've gotten to swim with them. I love taking people to see them. It's a totally new experience that people didn't think they could go swimming with sharks so easily in San Diego, but it's right there, and it's a really cool thing to experience, especially if you're a little afraid of animals in the ocean. These are great ones to get used to because they're really calm, really nice guys.
Yeah, they're definitely a pretty friendly animal. I've gotten some chances to swim with them too, and it's super, super cool. I love getting to do it. Also, we were looking at some pictures of leopard sharks earlier, and you guys saw their mouths are really, really small. They're only about the size of a fist. So they have small mouths that are on the underside of their face. And their teeth are absolutely tiny, right, Alan?
Yeah, they're super tiny.
Yeah, so we have a question from Gina, and she asked, how long do they live for? That's a really good question. Alan, do you have any ideas?
Yeah, so actually the oldest and usually estimated age for this species is about 30 years old. That's a great question.
Mm-hmm. And we got another question from Alion. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And Alion said, what do they eat? And that's a really great question, Alion, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, okay?
Promise we will. That's a big part of why they actually come to this specific location in San Diego every summer. So we'll definitely get to that in a little while.
Yeah. So one super cool thing that people can do with sharks, scientists love to do research on a bunch of different animals. And one really important thing is that there's a lot of leopard shark research going on. So why are leopard sharks important, Alan?
Well, leopard sharks are really important, and not just leopard sharks, but all sharks are really important because unlike movies and TV sometimes like to depict, they're not necessarily angry man-eaters that swim around the ocean. They're actually really important parts of the ecosystems and food webs, and they play very important parts in keeping ecosystems in our oceans healthy. So a lot of sharks are apex predators, and so they're really important parts of the food webs. And if you guys are familiar with food webs, you'll know that a food web is similar to a food chain. It's like an order in which animals and plants kind of eat one another, like predator and prey in an ecosystem. And sharks are typically apex predators in an ecosystem, which means they're at the top. So sharks are really important because they're a part of a food web, and they help keep all other animal populations in check in an ecosystem. So while people might think sharks are scary and mean, they're actually really important parts to keeping, the oceans and the world healthy.
Definitely.
And I think you've done some experience researching sharks, haven't you, Anshika?
Yeah, so that's a great way to segue into our next topic, which is how do we even study sharks? We have some questions coming up, but so if anyone has any ideas about how researchers can actually get up close and personal with sharks, feel free to drop those in the chat. But I've actually had some really cool experiences doing research on sharks. not actually specifically leopard sharks, but I've done some stuff with different methods of observational studies. So one way that scientists can actually figure out what sharks live in an area is by using an underwater camera. Basically what they do is they take a tub of bait, put it in front of a GoPro underwater, and then they see what sharks will come and eat the bait. So then they can get an idea of, okay, what sharks are around here, how many are we seeing, if we see specific individuals. It's super useful. It's a great way to, without spending too much money or too much time, just stick these underwater, and then you just got to get someone to look through the footage after. So that's pretty cool. Another way is to do kind of catch and release. So pickup sharks, not pickup sharks, sorry. So you put bait out into the ocean and go ahead and catch them and just go ahead and do some studies on them and release them with no issues at all. I see Claudia has an idea for how we study sharks. She says, putting on tags that track them. I think that's a great point. Alan, would you like to elaborate on that?
Yeah, Claudia, I'm so glad you brought that up, because that was actually the exact next thing I was going to talk about. So there's, as you can see here through our picture, this is Dr. Andy Nozal. He is a Scripps researcher and a shark biologist, and he is the reason why we know so much about the leopard sharks in these areas. And so he actually did use some tagging when he was studying these sharks. Now, there's a couple different types of tagging that scientists like to use for studying different animals. One type is GPS tagging, which, correct me if I'm wrong, Chica, stands for Global Positioning Signal
System.
Almost had it. 2 out of 3.
We're always learning here.
Yeah, and so a GPS tag is something that might be used more for a shark like a great white shark or something. And the reason why is because great white sharks often dive below the surface, come up to the surface. And when they come up to the surface, the GPS signal sends its signal to a satellite telling scientists where the shark is in the world. But unfortunately, GPS signals can't travel through water. And with leopard sharks, they don't go to the surface. They like to stay on the bottom with their mouths on the bottom. They like to eat food. They're bottom feeders, so they usually stick closer to the bottom of the oceans rather than coming up to the surface. So unfortunately, GPS tags didn't work for Dr. Nozal. So what he used instead was an acoustic tag. And now if you guys know what acoustic means, acoustic is sounds. And so the acoustic tags that Dr. Nozal used emitted a pinging sound at a certain frequency that he could tune into and follow. He followed them using something called a directional hydrophone, which is this device he mounted on a boat, and the device would show him where the shark was swimming. And he had to actually manually sit on this boat with a colleague of his and follow these sharks that he tagged, and he tagged 8 of them, and he would follow them for 48 consecutive hours.
Wow.
And his colleague would sleep. They would take turns sleeping every 3 hours, just having to follow these sharks. And so those types of tagging are one way that Dr. Nozal found where these sharks were traveling around this area.
Yeah, that's really cool. We have another question from Gina. She asks, how does their skin feel? Gina, that's actually a really good question. Part of some of the research that I did was actually studying shark scales. So they're called the dermal denticles, which translates to dermal, meaning skin, dent, meaning teeth. And they're basically, their skin basically feels like sandpaper. If you go one way on their skin, it feels kind of smooth, but if you go backwards, you feel all of those individual scales catching on your fingers. So it feels like sandpaper. So it's a really interesting feeling to be able to actually feel the body of a shark.
Yeah, and their skin actually serves a really good purpose. It helps make them very hydrodynamic, which helps them move and swim along very efficiently in the water. So great question, Gina. Yeah, if you ever get a chance to visit the aquarium again when we're open, hopefully if you see or if you ever get to experience some shark skin and you feel it, hopefully not in the wild because we like to leave animals alone, but if you ever get to see some samples of old shark skin, you feel them, it feels sort of like sandpaper.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a really cool thing. Sometimes on sharks, if you look close enough at their skin, maybe if you see one of them swimming around in our Shark Shores exhibit, you can actually see their dermal denticles and actually see those individual scales, which are super cool. And I've actually done research on those scales and being able to tell what species because different species have different scales. So it's a really cool thing that a lot of people don't realize. So it's definitely an interesting thing to be studying.
Yeah, I love just all the different features that all these animals are able to have to help them, survive in the environment. So very cool.
Yeah, definitely. So let's get back to our leopard sharks, though. I think Dr. Nozal was able to find out how they were traveling within La Jolla, right?
Yeah, so he found through tracking the sharks, he actually found that the sharks behave in different ways throughout the day, and they actually spent their time in a few different habitats. And if you guys have any guesses of what those types of habitats are, just off La Jolla shores, you can drop them in the chat as we're discussing them. So why don't we get into where leopard sharks like to live in San Diego?
Yeah, so think about some habitats, some ideas where you think. We already talked about one habitat that you guys might have seen in that aerial footage, but see if you guys know any other habitats in San Diego that might be able to house leopard sharks. And while we're waiting, we can answer some questions. I see a question from Shelby asking, are there any other shark species that are similar to leopard sharks? Alan, what do you think?
Wow, Shelby, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked. There's actually, quite a few similar species to leopard sharks. Actually, banded hound sharks and gray smoothhound sharks are cousin species of leopard sharks. They share a lot of the same DNA. And actually, if you're at the aquarium and you look in our Shark Shores tank, you'll see a gray smoothhound swimming along in there with them. And then also some other similar sharks to them we have at the aquarium are the horn shark and swell shark. These are also small sharks with smaller mouths, and they actually kind of look very similar to leopard sharks. The swell sharks are almost very similar looking. So all those sharks are small guys you can find usually in sandy areas, rocky reefs, and kelp forests.
And they're all found
in the San Diego area.
Sorry, yeah, and they're all found right here off the coast. We have all of them at our aquarium, so it's super cool to see all of these different species that are very, very harmless, and it's really cool to see how different the sharks can look. All right.
Great question, Shelby.
Yeah. All right. So now maybe we can move into some of the habitats. So I'd say one of the main habitats that we have right here off the coast is a submarine canyon. So if you guys have any ideas what it's like in a submarine canyon, go ahead and drop them down in the comments. See, maybe because some submarine canyons are kind of deep, right, Alan?
Yeah. So submarine meaning underwater, and canyon being just like a canyon you'd see on land, kind of tells you what it's like. So a submarine canyon is just like a canyon that's underwater. So sometimes when we look at the ocean, we forget that it's not just flat and sandy out there. There's rocks, there's canyons, there's trenches, there's all sorts of really cool types of geological formations happening underwater. And actually, there's 2 submarine canyons off of Scripps. Now, if you've ever been to the La Jolla area or the Birch Aquarium and you've looked off our back tide pool area, you wouldn't think that there's a canyon out there because you can't see anything underwater. But there's actually a La Jolla Canyon and a Scripps Canyon. And both those canyons are off there, and they're very good areas that the sharks like to go into, which we'll talk about a little more as to why they specifically like to go into the canyons.
Yeah, but if you guys have any ideas to why sharks would like to go into deep, cold canyons, see if anyone has any ideas about that, and you can add them to the comments, and we'll definitely come back to that question as well.
Yeah, because like I mentioned earlier, the sharks, they like to swim in nice, warm, typically shallow waters. So there's got to be an important reason why they would choose to travel into these submarine canyons off our coast.
And it might have something to do with a question that was asked earlier by Alion. If you guys remember that question, maybe think about that when you're thinking about why they'd want to hang out in the submarine canyons.
Yep. And so another one that they like to hang out in that I know you know all about, Anchika, is a kelp forest right here. So Anchika, can you tell everyone a little bit what it's like to be in a kelp forest? Because it looks kind of different than a regular forest.
Yeah, definitely. It's called a kelp forest because it does look kind of similar to a normal forest with trees, but instead we have kelp that's floating like off the bottom. And so that area is really good for animals to have protection. And it's not just for sharks. It's really good for a bunch of animals to hide in. The kelp provides food for a lot of animals too. So if you guys have ever been to Birch Aquarium or have seen our Kelp Cam lives, you've definitely seen this exhibit right in front of you. And you can see a lot of animals like to hide, like moray eels like to wrap themselves around the kelp and keep themselves from floating away. In general, sea otters will do that too. And it's really cool to see all of the different animals that live in a kelp forest, because it's just so rich in diversity, just because it's a great place for animals to hide and kind of take a break, relax a little bit.
Yeah, and so this image right here is from our Kelp Forest tank at the aquarium, right on, Chica?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Just wanted to double check. And you can see the leopard shark swimming there. And this is also the tank where you could find those similar shark species I mentioned, like the swell shark and the horn shark. And this kind of brings me back to a question I remember seeing a lot earlier in the chat. Someone asked, how do they sleep? And so some sharks are actually able to stop moving and pump water over their gills. So many people think sharks have to consistently be moving in order to breathe oxygen through their gills. But actually, leopard sharks, swell sharks, and horn sharks are a number of species that are able to rest on the ocean floor, and they are able to pump water over their gills so they don't have to constantly be moving. So that's a really cool thing you might see at the aquarium. If you ever see a leopard shark at Shark Shores kind of just hanging out, I actually saw that one time and I was a little concerned. I thought the shark wasn't okay, but then I found out that that's actually how some sharks like to just pump water over their gills. So a little fun fact, when you see sharks just hanging out on the bottom, some of them get to do that. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. So one more habitat that we have right here off the coast of San Diego is this habitat, the sandy shore. Alan, can you tell me a little bit more about the sandy shore?
Yeah, so that right there, as you can see, that is a bat ray swimming around our sandy shores. You can see some other animals swimming in the back. And the sandy shores is kind of just like it sounds. The sandy shores are close to the shores. There's not a lot of rocks. There's not really anything going on there except mainly just the sand and the water. And so a lot of the animals that you might see in these sandy shores, just like our Shark Shores tank at the aquarium, they're going to blend in with the sand. They might, hide in the sand, like halibuts. They really like to hide in there. California angelfish. Some of these fish they're really flat, so they blend in very well underneath the sand. And yeah, it's very cool. You'll find a lot of interesting animals swimming along these sandy shores you didn't think, especially like stingrays as well. Always important to stingray shuffle when you're walking through the sandy shores. And yeah, a lot of really cool guys in there.
Definitely. I'd say sandy shores is definitely one of the leopard sharks' favorite habitats, and we'll talk a little bit more about why they like it in a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so our next question for you guys is, we talked about these three really cool habitats, the Kelp Forest, the Submarine Canyon, and the sandy shores. And I just want to ask you guys, how do leopard sharks use each of those habitats? So we kind of alluded to that question a little bit before, but see if you guys can think, maybe if someone wants to think how leopard sharks will use those sandy shores. We talked about the water being warm, but Alan, do you have any ideas about how leopard sharks might use these habitats?
Oh, I got a lot of good ideas. Why don't we dive right into it? But before we do, we're also going to bring up Dr. Andy Knowsall again. So this is the scientist who is studying those sharks, and he was wondering the same thing too. He was wondering why these sharks came to this area and congregated in hundreds over the summer, and he wanted to know the same thing. How do these sharks use these habitats? So the first way Dr. Knowsall found this out was he did some observations. Those balloons you saw earlier, Dr. Knowsall used that balloon to take aerial footage and observe the sharks. Observations are usually one of the first things scientists do when they're trying to study something they're not sure about. So he found that most of these sharks there were primarily pregnant females. He knew that because from the aerial footage, he could tell by their size that they were mature animals. And then upon further inspection, he caught a few of them using a catch and release message, and he actually performed an ultrasound on them and found that they were pregnant females. So first he knew that they were pregnant females coming here. So I think that brings us into our first, actually, maybe not, yeah, our first reason why the sharks would come here, which is submarine canyons. So these pregnant females need a lot of food. And so in these canyons, actually, there's tons of market squid. And Anshika, do you know much about market squid? Can you fill us in, like maybe the size, what they look like?
Yeah, so Carrie in the comments actually did suggest that they come here to find food, which is exactly right, Carrie. Perfect idea. So market squid are pretty small. I'd say they're smaller than a leopard shark's mouth. They can definitely fit inside, and they like to hang out in these cold submarine canyons. So it's kind of perfect for these leopard sharks because they're actually nocturnal hunters. So what that means is they'll just go swimming overnight. After they've rested a bit during the day, they'll go swimming during the night down and deep into the submarine canyons to be able to find their food.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly right. So market squid is one of the favorite foods that the leopard sharks like to eat. And one of the ways that Dr. Nozal found this was from a method called a gastric lavage. Now, gastric lavage is when you sort of use like a tube that pumps out the stomach's contents. And it's a non-lethal way, which meaning it won't kill the sharks. It's a non-lethal way for the scientists to study what they're eating. And so when Dr. Nozal performed this gastric lavage on some of the leopard sharks he was studying, he found tons of market squid. And knowing that the market squid live in this canyon, knowing that they are nocturnal hunters, and from his tracking using a directional hydrophone and acoustic tags, he came to the conclusion that the submarine canyon was where the leopard sharks were going every night to eat.
Yeah. And Itisha asked a great question in the chat. She asked, why is it called a submarine canyon? Alan, would you like to elaborate on that?
Yeah, so it's called a submarine canyon. Prefix sub meaning under and marine meaning water, which means underwater. It just kind of translates to underwater canyon. So imagine you're going on a hike and you're going through some hills and you see a canyon. It's very similar to a submarine canyon, except the only difference is one's underwater and one's up on land.
Yeah,
so a lot of people forget that there's geological features underneath the water, trenches, canyons, all sorts of things. So yeah, great question.
Yeah, they have the canyons have the little walls that go down, so it's very, very like skinny and deep. So definitely, if you can look up videos and see how the submarine canyons look, and then you can really get the idea of, okay, that's why it's called a submarine canyon. All right.
Very cool.
Yeah, great question. So our next habitat is actually the kelp forest, and Alion had a guess about how leopard sharks use the kelp forest, and he said when predators want to eat them, they can hide in the kelp forest. Alan, is that correct?
That is exactly right. So as we mentioned earlier, the leopard sharks gets its name from the bars and spots on its back. And not only do these bars and spots give it a cool name, but they actually serve a pretty functional purpose. So in the kelp forest, there's lots of blades of kelp everywhere. And when light shines down from above through these blades of kelp, it actually creates beams of light shining down, which kind of gives everything a sort of shiny, different areas of lights going around. And with that different sort of spots of light shining through, that combined with the bars and spots on the leopard shark's back also help provide it with some protection. So if ever swimming around here, the kelp forest can actually help provide some good camouflage and protection for the leopard sharks. And also, for some leopard sharks that might be in different populations along the coast, maybe if they don't have a submarine canyon, they can go looking for market squid in. They may also be able to find some food in these kelp forests as well.
Definitely. Yeah. So the kelp forest is a really important ecosystem for leopard sharks. So that's why you see a lot of leopard sharks swimming around our big kelp forest exhibit. And generally in actual kelp forest, if anyone ever gets to go snorkeling or scuba diving and sees kelp forest, you definitely would probably find some leopard sharks in them. So our very last habitat that we talked about was actually the sandy shores. Alan, how do sharks use the sandy shores? There's not really much protection for them there, right?
Yeah, not really. So the sandy shores actually provide a very, very specific purpose for these sharks. So going back to one of the first things Dr. Nozal realized was that they are pregnant females. And so sharks can actually give birth in a few different ways. There's viviparous sharks, there's ovoviviparous sharks, and there's oviparous sharks. And the difference is some sharks lay eggs, like the horn shark and swell shark. They'll lay an egg in which the embryo will then develop outside of the shark, in which the shark will hatch out of. Some sharks, like the leopard sharks, will have an embryo inside of them, in which the pups will come out of. And other sharks do kind of a combination where they'll have like an egg inside of them, which will hatch, and then the live sharks will give birth. So leopard sharks, having pups inside of them, they actually go to these sandy shores area to do something which we call as behavioral thermoregulation. And like a crazy big word, but it's actually the exact same thing as when you see a bird sitting on its egg. The warmth that the mother provides for the embryo within the egg helps it develop along its pregnancy, helps it do it faster, helps it grow bigger, and just all around, it's a great way for the shark to have a nice, strong, and successful pregnancy. So these areas where the sharks are living outside of the sandy shores are like the warmest water areas in La Jolla. So there's also not a lot of waves crashing. If you look at the sandy shores where they like to swim, it's not a lot of waves, very warm water, and less waves crashing means less mixing of warm and cold water. So basically, when these sharks are hanging out in these areas, it's just like the same thing as a bird sitting on an egg to help its children hatch.
Yeah, so it's definitely a great place. I know I prefer the warm waters of the sandy shores to the colder waters of the submarine canyons. So I think leopard sharks, they have the right idea, right, Alan?
Yeah, they really do have the right idea.
Awesome. Yeah, so honestly, I think it's really cool. It's to see all of these leopard sharks, and this research has been super cool to be able to track what they're thinking and why they're doing it.
Yeah, it's really, really cool because, up until then, no one really knew why these sharks came here. And I think it's really awesome that we're able to study these animals and find out, that they use these different habitats all for specific reasons, because it really helps us realize how important it is to protect all these different areas of like different environments, because whether it may seem like it or not, they provide all these animals with all these different benefits, and they really are very helpful to their livelihoods. And luckily for these sharks, actually, the La Jolla Shores area is actually part of a marine protected area. So this area, you can't really hunt or take the animals. So luckily it's protected so that this congregation of sharks has a place they can come back to every summer and help keep our local leopard shark populations nice and healthy, because we really love to support these animals, because in the end, we're all connected and we all got to look out for each other.
Definitely. And what's great is that because they come back here year after year, it's kind of predictable. So if you guys ever want, you guys are more than welcome to go swimming with these leopard sharks that are from La Jolla Shores. This picture is taken at La Jolla Shores. So it's super cool to see that you could go swimming with these leopard sharks. Because it is a marine protected area, like Alan said, you aren't able to fish, you aren't able to catch them, you aren't able to really get too close to them, but you can definitely go observe them and have a really cool and unique experience.
Yeah, it's super awesome. It's a great way to experience the animals and get an even closer understanding to them. And with summer coming up and the beaches reopening, it'll be nice that you can go swim and experience those leopard sharks. And who knows? Maybe you guys might see me out there this summer, because I know I'm gonna be going out there a few times to say hi to those guys and girls.
Yeah, awesome. All right. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, but I think that's all the time we have for today.
Thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. It was a
Thank
pleasure
you.
getting to talk to you.